Good day and welcome to the Robust Ramblings podcast. My name is Gideon Marston and I'll be your host today together with Arnu van Wyk, good friend of mine and financial manager for a multinational entity. Stick with us today and I promise you will find some very interesting insights and learnings in the financial world, as well as just in managing your personal finances as well as that of your business. I hope you enjoy this. Good day, welcome to the Robust Ramblings podcast. I've got my good friend who's immigrating to Australia in a week, Arnu van Wyk, with me. Arnu, welcome.
Hi, thanks. It's nice to be here and it's nice to spend some time with you for a last time before I'm leaving. So yeah, it's good, but it's also sad.
Yeah, no, it is. It's very sad. You know, Arnu and I have been friends for, I think it's close to 9 years now. I think we met when I was in my second year at university here in Potchefstroom. And we've worked together, we've tried some entrepreneurial stuff together, we've been influencing one another, him more influencing me than the other way around, on entrepreneurship and finance management. And this is a topic that we love so much and discuss every single time we get together. We're very passionate about it.
Yeah, for sure.
So Arnu, thanks for joining and being open to sharing some of your background. So Arnu, at the moment, you are a financial manager for a multinational entity. So that Arnu is speaking from experience. He's a CMA graduate, so he's a chartered accountant. And basically, for those of you who don't know what that means, he's good with numbers and money. He knows how to make money and save money. So is that a good summary?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. Let's go with that for now and see what it goes from there.
Awesome. Okay, Arnu, so maybe we can kick off by you just sharing a bit of your own upbringing story. You know, many entrepreneurial people have grown up in an environment that's entrepreneurial. Some haven't. And I think there's interesting coincidences that we see in the stories of both sides. So would you mind just sharing a bit of who you are? I mean, you're married, you've got one little daughter already, another one on the way, another kid on the way. And, as a father, also having to provide for your family, you've had to think about these things a lot as well. So I'm going to let you do your thing and then let's see where the discussion takes us.
Yeah, for sure. I was born in Alberton in Johannesburg. I grew up there, and I think most of my time as a child, I didn't think much about business. My parents were both more on the conservative side instead of taking chances on new businesses or new ventures. So both of them had a steady income, a steady job, and that's sort of the environment that I grew up in. And obviously when there was opportunities like entrepreneurial days or stuff like that at school or whatever, I would try something and try and make some extra cash where I could. And I think something that also sparked this was a bit later in my life. I think around my high school time, my mother started to give extra classes for maths as a way to get some extra income. And I could see how that income could have been used for a lot of stuff that would not normally be able to be done in a month. So that was great to see how a bit of extra income can actually make a big difference. So that was something that sort of sparked this looking back now. But as I said, there wasn't big entrepreneurial stuff happening while I was growing up. I actually think the biggest portion of that actually started when I was in university. Being a student, you don't always get enough money for everything you want to do and need to do. So you need to start making some plans on how you can, stretch those rands to reach everything you wanted to do. And while I was in the hostel, I saw some opportunity to sell some food on Sunday evenings in the hostel. So this was quite easy since I had a nice big snackager. I could make a few sandwiches and then sell them off in the hostel, especially on Sundays when nobody was in a mood to go to town or whatever to get some food.
So just want to park here. So the only thing you needed was obviously capital to buy a snackager. Which is like $1,000 or...
Yeah, not even like 500,
whatever,
yeah.
And then you made snackages. Did you have like a set menu or did you just make like cheese and tomato? That's what they get? Or
No, so it actually started off as an opportunity. So I think that's the big thing about entrepreneurial mindset, is seeing an opportunity. So it was a Sunday. I was in my room. I was getting hungry. So I was there in the fridge seeing what's available. And I got some cheese, tomato, whatever, and made myself some nice snackages in the communal kitchen. And obviously the the people in the hostel smelled it and was also starting to think, well, this seems nice. And everyone started, hey, can't they borrow some bread and I make them as well something, because they're also now hungry and don't want to go to town. So the first time it was like, yeah, sure, let's make for everyone some bread and eat together. And the next time I thought, but now it's an opportunity. Now I can go and buy 2 or 3 extra loaves of bread, buy some extra nice stuff for nice snackages, and make that and charge people 10, 15 rand for a toasty. And that quickly developed. I mean, it was first just in our section of the hostel. Later, it was a bigger section of the hostel that they bought into it, and people started making orders earlier in the day. So it sort of evolved out of its own, out of an opportunity of seeing, hey, there's people who's hungry in the evening and let's find a way to feed them.
That's so cool. So, I mean, obviously you didn't have to pay electricity because
Yeah.
the hostel did that.
Exactly.
Your overheads of the hostel were, done already. So, yes, it's just bread. I mean, so if you, bread was back then was like, what, 10, 12 rand, maybe less.
Yeah. And then some ham and cheese and whatever.
Yeah, so I mean, you'd make your money back.
Yeah, easily. Each night you made your money back. And then obviously the extra cash you can start using to do something else. So that was a great like first step into doing this. We also tried some pancakes at a time that actually also sold quite well. So there was a quite nice experience to see an opportunity, try something, and it works out great. I think that sparks you to try and do something more. So that was a great opportunity the first time in the hostel. And then, yeah, as I obviously in my line of work or back then in my studies, a lot of it evolved around money, how to maximize your money, how to take what you have and increase it at the lowest risk. That's the kind of field I was playing on. And while doing this, I came across a platform called Easy Equities, which should be quite familiar to a lot of people. But this is a platform where you can buy and sell shares at quite a marginal cost. So you don't have monthly costs that you need to pay to be able to do this. And they also have a demo platform where you can play around with shares and see how they perform, and then get a feel of how to do the investing in shares, all of these kind of things.
So you buy stocks from companies, so it's shares of companies that's publicly listed in, I think they have South Africa, you can buy in United States stocks, I think it's NASDAQ stocks, and as well as Australian, they've got UK as well. That's great. UK companies, very cool platform. Practical. I think I love that. That's a practical thing to look at.
Yeah, definitely.
So back in the day, they were the cheapest trading platform for stock purchases, as well as easily accessible. And they didn't have a monthly fee, which a lot of platforms did have. I think they've got a 25 rand a month fee now.
Yeah, they actually do. There's some like a thriving thing that you can do, and if you reach all of your goals, then you don't need to pay the fee. But even still, 25 rand is not a lot of money to pay for such a platform.
Yeah, so it's a loyalty program. Yeah. So, I mean, when you started, a lot of people, obviously don't know where to start when it comes to purchasing shares. And we tend to buy stocks and shares in companies we know. I remember, we had this discussion many years ago when we just started working. We started, if I remember correctly, with like 50 rand. You pay in 50 rand, you buy like 50 rand worth of shares of whatever, whether it be Sasol or, I think I even purchased Spur and Pick and Pay and stuff like that at work. That's what I know, or knew back then. What was a challenging thing for you when it came to managing those portfolios? Because I remember for me, it was difficult to see when the value of the share drops and you feel like you're losing money, but you didn't actually necessarily lose anything, So maybe you can just share some basic insights for.
Yeah. Just quickly to jump back to the story. So when I started this, obviously it was not big money you were playing with. Like Gideon said, it's like 20 or 50 rand a year that you're playing around with. And that obviously makes you a little bit more willing to take risks. So you're more willing to put money somewhere, and if you lose some money, you're not too concerned about it. But obviously, as your portfolio grows and you put more money in, the amounts get bigger and it gets more tricky. And it's your hard-earned money you put in there, and it gets personal for you to lose money. And like Gideon said, sometimes the stocks take a dip and you sit at a minus 30% or whatever. And your first reaction is normally to think, I need to get rid of this. I'm losing money. But while the stocks are still on the market, you haven't lost anything until you actually sell them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So the perceived value of the stock is
perceived
less.
value is less. Yeah. But obviously, this is driven by a lot of factors, which we don't need to go into detail too much now. But just as it goes down one day, the next day it may jump up again. So yeah, it's good to know when to leave your stocks and when to wait it out. My normal preference is when it went negative, I would just like almost write it off. I called it school money. So that's something that I lost, and then school fees that I paid.
Yeah.
So then I'll just leave it there until one day when it becomes positive again, and then I can sell it, because obviously you're not losing anything as long as it's still in the stock.
Yes, because you're still owning an asset. It's not money
Yes.
that you're losing.
Exactly.
The perceived value is less, but the perceived value, as influenced by many different factors, can increase again.
Yeah,
Oh,
for sure.
pretty interesting. Okay, cool. Sorry, I interrupted you. Please
No,
continue.
for sure. So yeah, so that was like the next kind of venture that I tried, even while still in university, playing around with all of these different stocks and different ways to invest your money, which was quite new to me since, like I said, my parents were quite risk adverse, so we were never really involved in these kind of things. And it was great to, you put away money each month, a bit each month. And at the end of the year, you have extra money that you can spend on in December to go and visit someone or whatever. So it was quite great while in university to already start to learn all of these things. And I then think later on, towards the end of my university time, I sort of ventured more into other ways of creating income. I remember I spent some time on a bee farm where I learned to do some beekeeping and help sell some of the honey. And it was something nice because I am a person who enjoys the outdoors. So it was a nice way for me to get outdoors, and also a way to get some income and help a business also being established. So that was a nice other venture that I played around with for a bit. But yeah, then at the end of my studies, I actually started a full-time job. When starting my job, I obviously had some skills in investing, which I then continued, since this is also a way to bring in money into your account and into your future without having to handle it personally. Platforms like Easy Equities, using Alan Gray for pension funds, and all of these kind of sources that you can set up for one day in the future to have these funds available. And I think all of this actually also adds back to having a strong sense of budgeting. I think that's something that really guided me throughout all of my years, from starting at a very small salary until where I am now, luckily to be. So yeah, I think all of that comes back to having a basic budget that guides you. So in my budget, normally I will have 10% that I allocate as my tenth to the church or whatever.
Tithe, yeah.
Municipal
Ministry.
ministry
Yeah.
I give to. And then 30% of my funds I allocate to savings. So whatever type of savings that may be, it may be in shares, it may be in a business that I invest or something like that. And then the remaining, 60% is basically what I live from. And as my salary increased, I stayed in this path. So if I get more money, then I give more, I save more, and then whatever is left is what I use. And I think that's something that really helped me to grow my finances continually, and also, almost like dictate the lifestyle that you're living at. Because I've seen so many people, you get this big new salary raise or whatever, first thing you do is you no longer buy Checkers, go to Woolies, something like that, because now you have more money.
Or you buy a new car.
Exactly. And you keep increasing your living expectations. And by doing that, you're never saving more or advancing yourself more.
Sure.
Yeah,
That's brilliant.
Something that I keep close to me, and something that I'm glad I was able to do from a young age.
Yeah, so budgeting, just breaking it down simply. So budget being a list of your income and expenses, broken down into small categories, as a plan for what you should spend throughout the month, right? And we had this discussion earlier. So when it comes to the 30% and the 10%, 30 you save and the 10% that you tithe on, do you do that at the beginning or at the end of the month?
It's the first thing that
leaves.
goes out of the bank account.
So I know what the answer to this is, but why?
Because otherwise, you get to the middle of the month and you think, yeah, but I still wanted to do this and this, and then you spend that money on something else. So that's where debit orders are your friend. You set up a few debit orders for the money that needs to go to whichever streams it may be, and you basically live off what's left.
So a lot of people have, I have aversions to debit orders because it feels like I'm like in a contract that I can't get out of, and they're just going to take my money. So what we tended to do is you can also put on automated payments, and they don't cost you a cent. Most banks have the capacity to do that, in South Africa at least. So that's definitely something that helps. Something that Renee, my wife, and I, we've been doing, which was helpful on our budget. We save for things like the car that might need maintenance, right? So every month there's a certain amount of money that goes into that. And we don't keep all of those savings in one account. We've got different accounts. And those accounts, most banks have this savings pockets or savings accounts. They're free. So that you don't mix that money with the
Entertainment money,
or your
holiday
money or
yeah,
whatever, or your food budget, so that you keep that aside. So when there is a emergency expense, you can actually pay for that. So that's great. Okay, so you guys have a budget. What type of things do you think people should budget for, which they might typically forget to budget for?
I think in our case, something that we missed in the beginning to budget for was cosmetics and all of the money you spend on toothpaste and all of these things. And especially if you have a wife as well, there's a lot of extra expenses that we men don't normally think of in terms of cosmetic expenses, and they can add up quite a lot if you don't put that separate. So that's definitely something that we budget for separately. And then something that me and my wife do at the beginning of each month, we look at the month and say, okay, what abnormal items are there that's going to happen this month? So, say for example, we need to pay for some vaccines this month for our baby or whatever. Then we know we need to allocate that this month and take it out somewhere else. And that way you don't have this fixed budget that you just roll forward each month.
Yeah, it's not just a copy and paste. We do the
exactly.
same with like birthdays, anniversaries.
Exactly, yes.
When or we know like friends of us are getting a baby, we need to budget to make them food for that week or whatever the case may be.
And I mean also budgeting for entertainment. We're not meant to only survive each month. We're allowed to enjoy the funds we work hard for, and putting an allocation in your budget for entertainment, which gives you the freedom to go and do stuff, but also know where the constraints is in that.
Yeah, it actually gives you freedom. Like I've
Exactly.
heard people think that budgeting might be a negative thing because it feels restrictive. But if you know you've planned for that expense, you can actually enjoy the money. We saw that, I've always been a super saver. I never knew what I was saving for, but I would cut expenses where I can at my own expense, ironically. And I remember me and Renee and I, we were saving up to go to Turkey for a family holiday. So we were saving up for quite a while, and it felt so wrong to spend money on a holiday, and I had to kind of get over this thing of me finding security in my bank balance to actually be able to enjoy that and spend the money, obviously wisely, but to enjoy it because we've planned for it, and not like, roll over the 1 or 2 rand because, we might need to save it for something later. We've saved it. There's this funny story. I remember when we went on our anniversary, we set money aside for that, and we went down to the garden route. And as we were on honeymoon this one evening, we were like, okay, let's go eat somewhere nice, right? We've planned for this, let's go. So as we get into the car, I'm saying to her, this is difficult for me because it's actually, the stuff costs a lot of money. Like, I mean, eating out nowadays, it's expensive, or just going away or staying over somewhere. And she asked me, like, what else are you going to do with the money? I mean, I'm like, no, we're going to save it. And she's like, for what? Our next holiday, At the end of the day is to really enjoy what we've saved for. It's very good.
Okay. Yeah, I can relate to that myself as well. I love to set away money as much as possible and have all of these different investment streams that's busy accumulating. But it can create like a false impression that you have all of these money somewhere, but you're living in a mentality that you don't have anything and you can't spend money on anything.
It's like a poverty mindset.
Yeah, almost like a poverty mindset. Yeah. So then you're almost like keeping yourself back and not allowing yourself to enjoy life. That's also something that my wife helped me to learn, is that you're supposed to put money away for also enjoying life and not just building wealth for when one day you need it, or for an emergency, or for all of these things. Obviously, it's important to have money for when an emergency comes and all of those kind of things, but also have money to spend right now.
So both of us have very wise wives that help us to enjoy. I think Solomon actually writes in the book of Proverbs, or it's in Ecclesiastes, what is the goal of toiling your entire life just to, get money to never enjoy it? It's a waste. So it's actually really biblical wisdom as well. So you said two things interesting now. Firstly, the concept of diversification, which I want to touch on for a moment, as well as setting money aside for emergencies. So maybe let's start at the emergency side. Now, I know Dave Ramsey, financial influencer from America, very cool principles that he lives by and that he advocates for. And he's done some proper research on actual dollar millionaires, not like his own opinion. It's actual research. And he advocates very strongly for emergency fund. Would you mind explaining the concept of that, and if you guys have one, and how does that work?
Yeah, so an emergency fund for us is funds that is easily accessible, but still in a way that you don't use it for everything. And like I said, that 30% we allocate each month to different saving pockets, like you called it earlier. Some of it goes to long-term saving. Some of it is like more saving towards a specific goal, like buying a car or whatever. And the other portion is your emergency portion. So currently our savings is like 10% long-term, 10% medium, or 15% medium, and then 5% is on the short-term. And that short-term is for the day you stand next to the road and your car broke down and you just found out you need to replace the engine that costs 40,000 or whatever, or even a tire or whatever, to have a sort of a buffer for when that happens. So you don't need to go and get credit or swipe a credit card to be able to cover that, but you at least have some funds to alleviate that situation. Obviously, the one side of that is insurance products that you can have in place, but the other side is something that insurance would not cover, or unforeseen something that you can then pay out of that.
Yeah, like insurance won't pay for new tires. Yeah. So why would you have an emergency fund rather than swiping your credit card? Because your credit card makes allowance for unplanned expenses.
Yeah, so obviously the big negative side of a credit card is that 28% interest that you need to pay on your credit card. Whereas if you have these emergency funds, you can still put it in whatever investment portfolio. I would normally just put it in something that's easier accessible. So if you're looking at shares that are more volatile, you'll put in a longer term investment, since then the ups and the downs of the share won't have such a big effect on you. And something that's less volatile, say for instance the money market or something like that, that's linked to interest rate, you'll have the same return on that money, which would be lower than a high volatile share, but you'll have the same return, and at least it would be more than leaving your money in a bank. So that's the kind of product that I would use for a emergency fund. There's two reasons behind that. Obviously, you get your better interest than just leaving it in your bank account. And the second one is, if it's in my bank account, it's very easily accessible and it's very easy to spend it on something that it's not meant to be spent on.
Yeah. So basically, if you want to have a 20% discount on emergency expenses, save the money rather than using a credit card.
Yep, exactly.
Right. So what we do, for example, is we've got a mortgage for our house and we've got a flexi bond. So what that means is you can actually access the funds that you have saved more than what you should have paid up until this date. So it's extra capital, and you can actually use that as a separate bank account. So all the money in there decreases the monthly interest that you would be paying on your bond. So it actually helps you in the longer term. So we have our emergency fund in there, because then we're actually winning on the interest that we're paying on the mortgage itself. But it's still easily enough accessible that we can just transfer it to our bank account should there be an emergency.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, we also use that as one of our emergency funds. the one that is a little easier accessible for everyday emergencies, and then your bigger one for massive emergencies, if we can put it like that,
Yeah.
we have in a separate savings platform.
Yeah. So when it comes to very large emergencies, you mentioned something like insurance earlier. So I mean, I don't have enough money saved up to replace my house if it would burn down. For that, I've got insurance. Same with my vehicle, but for smaller things, we like cell phones.
Yeah, exactly. So even for us, what we did is when we bought our home and you need to furnish it, in the beginning we had furniture insurance for everything we had in our home. And then as our emergency fund grew and the emergency fund was bigger than the value of the items in our home, I canceled our insurance for home cover because I no longer need to rely on an external party to cover that cost should something happen. And then instead of paying an insurance premium to someone, I pay that back into my own savings.
Yeah, we did the same thing. It's interesting how much money you save um, when not paying insurance if you've got the capital to actually have to use that money, or if you've got the capital available to replace an item yourself. I did the math recently on something simple like between two different bank accounts. So at an unnamed bank, I had the option of taking a 400 Rand a month account versus a 200 Rand a month account. And I had a conversation with someone close to me who said, don't skimp on that. It's just a bank account. Like, just spend the money. And the 200 Rand difference, I thought, okay, cool. If it's 200 Rand difference every month for the next 30 years, because that's the term of my mortgage, and if I would have invested the 200 Rand a month, then the increase on, let's say, inflation, if I had inflation-based increase on that 200 in terms of returns, I would actually save up more than a third of my mortgage just because of 200 Rand a month. So it came down to 352,000 Rand, more or less, with some assumptions in there. That's the difference that a 1 or a 200 Rand a month makes. So we actually followed the same thing. I'm glad you brought this up, right? So we do the same. So we said, okay, in the beginning, the things we cannot live without because our jobs depend on it was like my laptop and my cell phone. And now our emergency fund is saved up to a point where we can replace those if needed. So we cancelled the 200, 300 Rand a month on that. And now we just add that to our savings as well. So basically looking at your emergency fund as a risk, call it a combined risk fund, right? So I still have medical aid because I know if something happens, I don't have enough money. Like if something big happens, I don't have enough money to cover my medical expenses, right? So that's why we have hospital plans and all of these things. But the things we can cover, that we rather try and self-insure to some extent where it's possible. And obviously there's a lot of wisdom required. This is not financial advice, but it's the principles we follow that we could see the fruit of to date. That's a very interesting point. Maybe let's jump over to diversification.
Sure.
So you have multiple streams of income. You have diversified into different areas. I mean, you've mentioned just now that you've got shares. So that's one area of income or capital growth at least. Let's call it net wealth creation. I think that's maybe a simpler term. So you've got your own house. Well, you had one. You sold it now. But the concept of property as a form of diversification. Like how do you, maybe firstly explain the concept of diversification and then how you view it and why you chose to invest in certain areas.
Yeah. So obviously looking at risk and all of the previous things we spoke about, the idea of diversification is not to put all of your money in one investment. The reason is obviously anything can happen if that one fund or one platform you're using collapses, then you lose all of your money. And the idea of diversification is things with different risks. So you have, as I said previously, a higher risk profile that you use for a long-term investment, a medium risk profile for something more short-term, and then low risk for something that you might need tomorrow. So all of these have different ideas behind them. Obviously, you don't want to put money you want tomorrow in a high risk environment, which you can lose 20% or whatever on that investment. And it's not necessarily only in stocks. Like I said, there's a lot of different platforms. In my life, I've ventured into a few of them. At a time, I purchased a business from my friend Gideon, And we try to diversify ourselves in our investment platforms or the way we invest into doing something on our own, a business of our own. But obviously, all of this comes, like I said, it's a learning school. First time we did it, and we realized that even though it was a great way to generate some income, the amount of human capital, the amount of hours, the amount of effort that I had to put in to actually make it work was not worth it. So that's not something that we used at that time, but it's definitely something that you can do to as a diversification. Then also, like you said, property is another diversification. Property, there's two sides connected to property. Obviously, the one is if you live in it and you sell it over 20 or sell it after 20 or whatever years, you might get some capital growth on the funds that you paid to buy the property initially. The other side is having a property that you rent out to get extra income. So in our situation, when we found out that we were expecting, we were starting to think about starting a family, we realized we need to have our own space, somewhere to live, somewhere where we can make our own home. So my wife and I, we started looking for a property, and not really finding something in our in our budget class that we thought, okay, this is really worth it. I ventured the idea of what if we buy something with a space that you can rent out as well, like an apartment or a flat or whatever, that you can rent out. So obviously then you could push up the amount you can be able to pay in a month a bit because you have someone that can help pay back the mortgage. So we bought a property with a flat. It was a great time for us in this property. We were able to get a nice interest rate, which was great, and helped us to pay off the property. And obviously we had some sort of passive income coming in from the rent of the flat that was on the property. So we took that money, and the idea was, instead of putting it into our mortgage at the moment, since the interest rate that we got was quite low, we decided to rather invest that. So we took the monthly money that he paid, we invested it, and the idea was, I did the calculation, I think it was after 10 years, we would have enough money saved up to actually squash our complete loan instead of paying on 30 years for that loan. So that was a way to sort of build our own wealth in a home and also have some sort of investment on the side. So that was a nice way to diversify. And then once our baby was born, I realized that one day she would probably want to go study and would need a lot of capital or investment from our side to be able to do this. And I thought it would be great to have a different kind of vehicle to do this instead of just investing in your normal shares and whatever, which I still do. I mean, I did the calculation. If I only invest, which I'm currently doing, 200 Rand a month for her over 18 years, the amount you get at the end of the time is astronomical. And I mean, 200 Rand a month is not a big expense for you now, but over time, you can bless her with a really big inheritance. But back to the point. So at this time, something that I've been playing around with, but was a bit too afraid to take the leap of faith, was student accommodation. So when we were almost close to conceiving our baby, we shopped around a bit for a student accommodation home. Then went into a partnership with a family member, and we bought a home that we are currently renting out to students. So the idea of this home was that it should be something that's managing itself. It shouldn't be something that I need to go and manage on my own. So I got an agent that's managing it for me at a 10% cost, and they're doing everything on the property, repairs, collection of debt. All of that is on their account, and they manage that, which is great. I mean, then I don't have to sit with all of that worries and all of that stress regarding that.
So, I mean, this is a good point. So you spoke about this earlier, the human capital and the effort required to manage your investment. So you're saying you're willing to give away 10% of the return that you're getting on your revenue because it's going to cost you more in 10% of the value of your time if you were to manage that yourself.
Yes, for sure.
Because that, what's the right word? So it actually takes away your capacity to be innovative and create more business opportunities.
And even just be present at home. I mean, we all know a geyser never bursts at 5 or 6 in the evening. It bursts at 12 in the evening.
Yeah.
And yeah, all of that stuff always happened at the most unfortunate times where you're not wanting to go out of the home and go and fix stuff. So passing that on to somebody else gives me the capacity to be at home and actually be present.
And it's amazing how these things never break at your own house. But at rental properties, it just, I don't know, maybe the geezers know, it's a rental property and then they just tend to break more.
Yeah, something like that.
Sure.
Yeah, so the idea was basically someone managing it for us, and we obviously just reap the benefits of having the property. And obviously, you can do a lot of shopping around. There's some nice tools and platforms you can use with calculators to try and figure out how to make an investment that's savvy. Obviously, myself being in finances, I did 2001 calculations before I chose a property.
On your own spreadsheets and using the tools online and everything.
Yes, yes. And yeah, we were very fortunate in the property that we bought. It's able to carry itself in a month and also have some spare capacity, which we can then reinvest into other businesses.
Oh, that's brilliant.
So that's definitely, again, an extra income stream. Yeah.
That's very good. So, I mean, diversification, it's an important thing. And for anyone starting out, when I was like this, how can I diversify the 100 Rand that I have available, right? It's not possible necessarily to do it at the beginning, but you have to start somewhere. Where would you say, once again, this is not financial advice. I have to say this because it is not. In your experience, if you can go back, where would you say the best place would be to start with your 100 Rand a month or 200 Rand a month in your case when you started back in the day? Just to get into a market.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the share options is definitely a good option. The shares is a good option on Easy Equity, since you're able to buy a lot of different industries shares on the platform. You're able to invest in different kind of products on their platform. Because I mean, there's two kinds of diversification. We only spoke to the one side, which is complete different products. One being a home, one being shares, one being rental income. It's complete different products. But I mean, even in the share market, you can diversify, not put all of your money on Sasol or whatever share you favor the most, but have a diversification in that. Having your 5-6 different type of shares that you buy instead of just buying into one share also diversifies your funds.
So, I mean, we're not advocating for Sasol or not advocating Sasol. It's just an example. If we think about, so that's a good point, diversification into different shares. So you can have diversification into different companies in the same industry. You can also have diversification into multiple different industries. So if I diversify into, I don't know, let's say property companies, right? There's many of them listed on the JSE. If I invest into multiple different property companies, let's say I invested before COVID hit, and COVID hit, all of my shares would have taken a knock. But if I've invested into multiple industries, so let's say I've got pharmaceuticals and property, then the one would take a knock and the other one would actually grow. So it's good to look at that type of diversification. It's a very, very good point. So something else that you can think about, Arnu, on the stock exchange is, my wife advocates for this a lot, ETFs. Would you mind explaining the concept of an ETF and why that might or might not be a good investment choice for someone starting out who doesn't want to, I'm going to call it gamble, take chances on a particular company's stocks?
Yeah. So basically, an ETF is like a combination of a few shares. So it's a few different shares that people put together, and they sell this to you as a complete package. They then, obviously, the company that sells the ETF, you get a few companies that sell these, they did their research around this specific package they're selling to you. And this package will have a specific risk rating, whatever, so you'll have a better idea of the type of risk you're getting into. They obviously manage the ETF for you, and you get a exposure on one share to multiple companies. Instead of investing your 100 Rand into a specific company, you put it into an ETF and they split this out between a lot of different companies.
So ETF being an exchange traded fund.
Yes.
I think it's a good way of describing it. Call it like a basket of different companies being put together, and it's percentage wise. So the ETF, whoever runs it, says, the most prominent one would probably, or famous one would be the S&P 500, right? So people speak about this a lot. So it's the 500 biggest companies in the US. or US.
US doing the best performance.
Yeah. So percentage wise, so I mean the three best companies, the largest percentage of the 100 rand that you would invest into this goes into those three companies. I think it's like Google and Apple and Microsoft or whatever the case may be, right? So they split the risk into multiple different companies, but you also then know you're investing in reputable companies, which are not, I mean, they're not fraud free and they don't not have issues. They've got their own things, but at least you know you're diversified across industries, even though, I mean, the S&P 500 would be very heavily weighted to the technology industry.
Yes.
Just because of the size of the top companies. You know, at least there's some form of diversification. So it balances out negative impacts on markets. So something like the S&P 500, even though it took a knock in COVID, it took a lot less of a knock, and it increased in value quicker. So you're going to have more stable growth. You're not going to have your 100% growth in a year there, but it's stable growth versus a lot more risky on one company having to perform. It's 500 companies that influence one another. So do you invest in ETFs?
I do. Yeah. So, some of my, well, obviously it's back to your strategy. One of my strategies is investing in a product that the South African government is offering us. It's called a tax-free savings account. So each individual is allowed to invest 36,000 Rand a year into a tax-free savings account, up to a maximum of 500,000 that you're allowed to put in
your lifetime.
In your lifetime.
And you can do that for anyone that's alive. I mean, you can take it out on your baby girl now.
Yes. Yeah. And obviously the benefit being the total growth that you get on these shares or whatever you use this tax-free savings amount, allocation for, the total savings on that is tax-free, or the total growth. So for me, on my tax-free savings, I only use ETFs and use these as a vehicle to increase that value. Yeah,
that's brilliant. So we also, I mean, make use of tax-free savings accounts. The challenge is not pulling that money.
Yeah.
So I mean, we've had a case where we had a high return investment where we required cash for, where we did the math and saw that this is quite a stable return on investment that we can capitalize on now, and that the growth would be more than we get in the tax-free savings account. So we removed some of it, but we can never replenish that again. You know, we used some of our limits. So that's a calculated decision that we have to make, and we have to live with the consequences of whatever that plays out to. But I mean, something like this for your daughter is a brilliant thing, because you were saying earlier that the 200 Rand a month that you can save for her is going to have massive growth over many years. And you would typically pay capital gains tax.
On capital gains tax
on shares if it's in a share platform like Easy Equities, or you pay a rental income tax if it's just in a normal tax-free savings bank account that certain banks or institutions.
Interest taxes,
so that's a very interesting concept. So can we quickly shift to companies, right? So you've managed your own businesses. You've managed other people's businesses. I mean, the company that you're working for now is doing financial work across many different continents, never mind just countries, all across the world. How should guys starting their businesses or even running their businesses, like how should they manage their finances? What's the basic things that they should consider when doing this? You know, maybe just an example of the type of line of thinking would be, don't mix your finances with the business's finances. You know, that type of practical advice.
Yeah, I think one thing that I'm seeing a lot with small businesses is the fact that you don't have a good record of what's actually happening in your business. Accounting or having an accounting platform or something like that seems like an unnecessary expense when you're starting off a small business, but you don't know what's happening to your funds. So even if you just use something simple, if you're really small, on an Excel spreadsheet or whatever, I mean, there's a lot of good platforms out there that's not that expensive to use, even free ones that you can use.
What I'm using now as an example would be Zoho Books. So you can get a free account for one user. It doesn't cost me anything. It helps me with invoices, managing payments, etc.
Exactly. And I mean, that just helps you to understand what's actually going on in your business. I mean, sometimes you see you have a positive bank balance and you think, I'm doing good. My business is fine. But you don't necessarily take into account people you might still owe money. Items that may come up in the future that's going to cost a lot more than you have in your bank account. And that's causing companies, when those disasters strike or when those items come to pay and you need to pay them now, then you're sitting with an issue because you don't have an idea where to get the funds. Where if you manage your business from the beginning as if it was a big, massive company, you're definitely going to see the fruit of that. So yeah, I think that would be my advice, managing it like it was already a big company. Making sure you have your correct procedures for everything in place. I mean, something that I can just think of is you need to have your policies in place before something happens. You don't want to, when you have an incident with an employee or whatever, then need to draft up something to back yourself. You want all of this stuff in place beforehand. Yeah, like setting it up as a big company before you even start.
There's so many, what are they called? Freemium tools. So it's free up to a certain point. If you want to add more users, you can, I mean, so what we've done, even with some of these tools, is we've got multiple users using one account because we don't want to split it over multiple accounts. We don't have the need for that at the moment. And then using the free version or the limited free version, to track expenses. Now, in my case, I have to put in the effort of reconciling my finances in my bank account with my application. But at least I'm logging everything electronically without having to go through Excel spreadsheets and whatever. It's a lot less effort, and you still get people with actual papers and files and stuff.
Yeah.
So you have to keep, so in a business, you have to keep proof, I think it's 7 years of every transaction. So every slip you have to save. And instead of having, cupboards and cupboards full of actual slips that tend to disappear and the ink goes off and all of that, you just get a free app that you can save everything on with the date, the cost amount, all of that. It's amazing. So definitely wise tools.
Yeah, for sure. So I think, yeah, that would definitely be one thing to actually help your business. And the other thing is, yeah, we all know it, but cash remains the most important thing in your business. So it's one thing to drive your profits and to make money, but the other thing is to actually have the cash in hand to do it. And especially like using lines of credit or something like that is something that you should really be wary of if you're not in a position to repay it when you're starting up a business. My approach to a startup is rather to be a bit more conservative. Instead of taking out a loan or whatever to start up an idea that you don't necessarily have all the backing for, that it's actually going to be a success, or at least 80% sure it's going to be a success. And then when it should fail, I mean, you're sitting yourself and your family in a bad position. On that point as well, something that you should definitely do, like you said, splitting yourself from your business, is to register a company for your business. It's very easy to do it. You go onto the website, you register your company. I think it's like 200 Rand or something like that to register.
This is the CIPC websites. So CIPC is the local South African companies commission. And you can log onto their website. It's super simple. I promise you it's going to take you longer to think of a name for the company than actually registering it. And it costs like 200 Rand. And then you just need to open a bank account, which you can do at all the major banks in any ways.
Yeah. And this helps to firstly split yourself from your business. And secondly, on a risk perspective, the company is then seen as a separate person from yourself. So the company can get credit in its own name. The company can transact in its own name, not necessarily in your name. Making the risk that you take a bit lower. Obviously, you still need to sign some sort of suretyship for the company since you will be the director. But yeah, that's in a way you can limit the exposure you get.
Yeah, that's good. So, I mean, the reason why you want to split the finances of the company and yourself is very similar to why you have a emergency fund separate from your own bank account. It's so you don't spend the money and take your wife out for dinner with the money that you were actually supposed to use for salaries or buying stock. And what you were saying earlier about cash flow, cash is king, right? So I appreciate this a lot. I mean, we've seen it in our own context, companies that we've worked for, as well as our own businesses. If you don't have the cash on hand, you can't buy the products you need. Or if you go through a bad month, then you don't have the money to pay the salaries. So let's say to take the stock example, right? So you have to buy stock and hold on to that stock without it creating revenue for you up until the time you sell it. So you don't get the money back immediately. only after you've sold the one product of the batch, then you get that one product's revenue.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's basically called your working capital cycle.
Yes.
So yeah, that's the term we use. But in layman's, it's basically you have three sections in there. The first one will be creditors. That's people where you owe money to that you need to pay in a certain amount of days. The second one would be debtors. That's people that need to pay you. And the third one is, like Gideon mentioned, your inventory or your stock levels, something that you need to buy to be able to do your business, and it's only going to convert to cash at a later stage. And these items are important to manage when you're looking at cash in your business, because these are the items where cash gets stuck basically for a period of time.
So you need to look at all three of those things. So there's creditors, inventory, and debtors. So you have to look at all three of those things together to get the actual picture of what's going on in your business. So that's very good. So I mean, things you can think of is inventory. What's the right word? Payment terms. What are payment terms between you and companies that you work with? So some companies, especially larger ones, they push to make sure that they have the longest period of time to pay you, or before paying you, even after they've done the work for you. So typically that would be 30 or 60 or 90, or like in way out cases 120 days. So you only get the money of the work that you've done 30 or 60, or and that obviously has a knock-on effect on your cash. So you've bought something from your supplier, they want to be paid now. Now you have to first sell that, and after selling that, wait 30 or 60 or whatever days before having the money. So if you don't have the cash, then you actually have to close your business.
Exactly. Even though you're making a profit.
Because you don't have the cash to pay all those things. And it's kind of like I almost want to say a house of cards that starts falling down. So, I've heard the term a lot that companies outgrow themselves. They grow too quickly and then they have to close down. So is this typically what then happens?
Yeah, I mean, they push on certain big sales or whatever and need to buy a lot of stuff to make the sales happen. But then you spend all your money trying to chase these bigger profits or these bigger sales values, but you don't have spare cash to service your loans or pay your rent or whatever. And that's the things that start to bite you. I mean, looking at a company, you shouldn't be managing it in a different way as you're managing your own finances. In a company, you should also have a savings account. You should also have an emergency fund. You should also have somewhere that the company's investing, or might it be your own new product you're developing or investing into another company. You should also have an investing and savings side in your company. And the other side of your company should be to uphold your current standard in your company.
Sure.
So I don't think you should be managing it in a different way as you're managing your own finances.
That's very wise. I've never even thought of looking at a company in that same way. Yeah, that's very good.
Emergencies don't only hit people, they hit companies as well.
Very good. So something you mentioned earlier, and this is something I think is very interesting, right? So you mentioned that you had someone, a family member, go into business with you on your student accommodation.
Yes.
Why did you do that?
So at the point, since we decided to finance the student home, we needed to have quite a big value of financing. And since I already had a loan in my own name, I knew the chances of me being able to qualify for a second loan as well wouldn't be viable, wouldn't happen. So that's why I decided to partner with somebody to almost like share the risk in terms of we both go into it, we both put a portion of the cash we put into the business as an upfront investment, and then we both stand surety for the loan. So the idea was just, it wouldn't have been possible for me to get a model that works. Like I said, I did 2001 calculations, and a model that works required a certain amount of finance, and it was not something I was able to bring to the table on my own.
So this is a very practical example that actually ties back to companies outgrowing themselves, right? So Arnu, in your personal capacity, your business was outgrowing your own ability to finance it. So I'm going to try and pull a parallel between the two here. So in the same way that you got a partner on board, you gave away some of the shares in this entity or idea venture, so that you can actually make this a reality. Companies go through the same thing. So when they outgrow themselves, typically what can be wise, depending obviously on the type of investor and whatever you bring in, is getting a partner, an investor on board that can help you scale or grow or even just bring cash into the mix, and then share the risk with you. That's why companies go public and list on stock exchanges, because they need capital, and for that they're willing to give away shares.
Yeah, ownership in the company. Yeah.
So that is a good principle that you followed. And it also helps in many cases when you need a certain skill set in your entity to grow it or make it successful that you don't have, or you don't have the capacity to do it, like you were saying earlier, right? So you can either outsource the skill, or you can get the skill in-house as an investment. So you outsource the management of your property because it's easily accessible to do that, and you don't have to give away ownership to do that.
Yes.
But getting cash on hand wasn't as easy to get, and that's why you made a decision. Very interesting risk management thing there. So that's a beautiful example of how you can help scale or
Yeah, and obviously there's two sides to scaling. The one is debt, so getting a loan from someone, and the other one is equity, which you spoke to earlier, and that is giving away a portion of your business for actual cash. So the two, that you need to get a relationship or a ratio between the two about what you are going to give away and what you're going to do via debt. So obviously the big difference is debt has a fixed commitment. You need to pay a monthly value each day to whatever debt, each month to each whatever debt agent you used, might it be a bank, whatever it might be that you used. On the equity side, that person will want to receive dividends, but this is not something that is promised. This is something that can be promised at a later stage. So obviously, should you be in a position where you know, hey, this is a great idea, but you're only going to get the total return of this idea in, say, 2 years, then you can rather perhaps choose an equity instrument where somebody goes and get their own cash and brings the cash into your business, and you give them a portion of the business. And for that, you then only you pay them back in 2 years' time or whatever.
Yeah, so you have to make some form of a commitment beforehand when bringing in a partner, and then that's a goal that you need to work towards so that they can get a return on their investment. I mean, they're not bringing the cash to you just because they love you. You get angel investors, and that's great, but that's the minority of the cases. Yeah, that's helpful. That's very helpful. The debt instruments that you get, I mean, we can obviously go into some of that, I think maybe in the next conversation, but the concept of a dividend, right? So this is a concept that is prevalent when buying shares, so on a stock market, so on easy equities, as we referred to earlier as an example. Also, the expectation from shareholders that dividends should be paid out, or the potential expectation thereof. Would you mind explaining just briefly the concept of a dividend, and then why it gets paid out?
Yeah, so this is basically the return you're paying out to anyone who has invested equity in your company. But like I said, the difference between this and a debt instrument is the fact that you're not forced to pay out a dividend each year. But if you're paying out dividends, it's obviously mean you're a listed entity most of the time, and there's perceptions that realize when you pay out dividends. So say, for example, 1 year you pay out a dividend of R1 for each of your shares you have, and the next year you pay out only 2 cents for each share you have. There's going to be a perception in the market that, hey, something's not going great with this company because why are they paying out less than they did in the past? And that's almost like the catch with dividends. When you start paying, you need to almost keep the trend. You need to consistently pay the same amount for years to come, or give a reasonable explanation. I mean, it could be that 1 year you're paying out R1 a share. Next year you tell everyone, hey, we got this massive business opportunity that we're going to invest in instead of investing back into the people that invested in us. So just be open with the market in terms of why you are paying out your dividends or why not. And then obviously, you can manage it from there. Once again, it is going to be a big cash outflow that you need to plan for. So it's something that you need to manage.
Very interesting. So, okay, and dividends on the stock market. So you can actually receive dividends. Not all companies do this. So some companies decide to pay out dividends. There's certain ETFs that I know of that actually also focus only on dividend paying companies. That's actually something that you've mentioned to me in the past that you can look at for tax-free savings accounts as well. So if you invest in dividend-bearing tax-free savings like ETFs, then you get the dividend income, you get the actual interest growth on the ETF itself, as well as then the growth on the dividend income. So it accumulates quicker over time. So that was an interesting thing. But so companies would pay you extra, call it they'd bless you with an extra R1 a share or a R2 a share or a 50 cents a share or whatever, just to say thank you that you invested in them and to show you a sign that it's going well with the company.
Yeah, I mean, your return on your investment, you as a person who invests into a company, is basically split up into two streams. Your one is your physical capital return you're getting. You bought a share for R1, and after 2 years, it's worth R5. So you've got R4 of growth in your share. So that's the one type of growth that a shareholder can get. The other type of growth is a dividend. So instead of you investing R1 and it grows to R4, it might grow to R3, but you also get a R1 dividend. And those two together make up the growth that you receive. So it's a different form of growth that you receive. The one is a payout that you receive, and the other one is a growth on your capital. And obviously, the company has the discretion on how they want to spend it. A company that's like an up-and-coming company, still starting up, still finding their feet, still growing, would rather reinvest any spare money they have into themselves to keep the company growing. But a company that's been around for 40 plus years is sort of like a stable position where they are in, and they would rather give back to their shareholders who have been investing in them for 40 years to get where they were, instead of keeping the money in the company.
That's very good. So this is a principle that you've touched on now that you mentioned earlier as well. So I've heard about this before, people referring it to as overflow income or capital. So when you, as Arnu, get more income from your business, then so you make profit. Do you spend the profit on new double cab buckies or to go and enjoy, I don't know, overseas holidays or whatever the case may be? Or do you reinvest it back into the company? And why would you say the one or the other?
Yeah, so currently the business that I'm running is my student accommodation. And the idea is obviously over time to scale this. And obviously I have a mortgage that I need to pay off on the property. And the sooner that mortgage is paid off, the sooner the returns will be much bigger. So in my case, I have an emergency fund in my company that I keep in a separate account, which equates to basically 1.5 months of expenses that I have in there. And anything more than that, the idea is to put that back into the loan so that you can grow the company instead of giving a payout to yourself. Obviously, the idea of a business, you being the owner of a business, is one day to reap out of that. But a decision that I made, and I mean that's something that every business owner should make, but the decision that I made was to rather grow the business now, and at a later stage you can reap the benefits like paying yourself a bigger salary out of the business or whatever benefits that may be.
Yeah, that's very wise. Now, I think that's a decision that we see a lot of young people making, is spending the money and living with it rather than focusing on growing it, because we want to have a lot of luxury things now rather than later. Sure. No, Arnu, this has been amazingly insightful, even for me, conversation. I mean, for me, what really stood out is the concept of running your business like you run your own finances. I know it's a basic thing, but just thinking about a business having an investment account as well, emergency fund as well, thinking over in those lines, it actually helps me to think of my own company and how I can keep growing that. So thank you for opening up your life.
It was fun to share what I have.
Yeah, I look forward to more conversations on this. I actually found the financial part at the end of the company is very interesting. I'd love to touch on this in future conversations, should you be willing. But yeah, thank you for your time and thank you for listening.
Yeah, thanks. It was good fun.
I just want to say thanks to everyone for listening, and I just want to encourage everyone just to subscribe, go to our social media pages, Instagram, LinkedIn, and if you guys are keen on booking a call with us to do a session with us and just have good chats, book a call on our Linktree link, and see you guys in the next one. Thanks.